Let's move on from the olden days to the newer days. Mikey Varas, officially the head coach of San Diego FC, a historical academy and assistant manager. This will be his first gigs as a men's pro head coach outside of a short 2-game stint overseeing the most overhyped USMNT in this century. He has experience in the Sac Republic and FC Dallas Academy before being appointed FC Dallas's assistant manager under Lucha Gonzalez. Then he took over the U20s for what is arguably their most successful stint in program history, winning the CONCACAF U20s in impressive fashion with a goal differential of 31-3. This then qualified them for the U20 World Cup, where they were bounced in the quarterfinals by Uruguay. He was also the assistant coach under Triple G during his second stint before caretaking the two friendlies against Canada and New Zealand, which they lost and drew respectively. But if you ask anybody, it's still Greg's fault. Now he takes over a startup side in which he was so impressed with, he offered to be a part of it in any way, according to Tommy Scoops. He passes up an assistant role in Mauricio Pochettino's staff during a home World Cup for this opportunity. Instant reaction to the signing, go.
Oh man, I hope I don't get a lot of heat for it, but my instant reaction was that's a bit underwhelming
I knew
considering
you were going to
this.
say that. You're such a yeah, that's always your reaction to everything is, oh, it's not Pep Guardiola, so it could be better.
That is not true. That is definitely not true. I mean, the way that they had started building out this roster felt so ambitious, and I think they're just taking. I'm not saying that Varas is necessarily going to be bad, but it's a big risk because, as you said, he's got basically zero experience as a top level head coach. I mean, he's never coached, I don't think, any games at the club level, top level. And then maybe I mean, I definitely think there's heavy recency bias on my mind, but very unimpressive performances in the most recent USMNT matches where he was in charge, like highly unimpressive. I think, if there's a graph tracking maybe like the momentum of how you feel about the signing, it is pretty low right now, just based off of those two games. And I think that's common with a lot of people. And I totally recognize that I'm probably putting too much emphasis on two games versus like a longer run of span of time where he has like more time to kind of put his hands on things. But yeah, it just felt a little bit underwhelming. I think mainly for the fact that he just has no experience at the top level right now. It feels like a big risk, and I just felt like I thought they would go with something, I guess maybe a little bit safer, maybe someone with a bit more experience at the top level, not even necessarily at like in MLS, just somebody with more top level experience. Period.
You needed to throw something in about graphs in there, didn't you, you nerd?
Take the chance
Um,
whenever I get it.
yeah. Listen, my reaction is that this outlines a clear plan by San Diego on what they want to do, right? It felt like, and I think for now it confirms it, that they wanted to build a team around youth development. If you look at the way they started their connection with the Right to Dream Academy, Joaquin Escoto as their academy manager, residential academy for grades 6 through 12, it was very, very focused on development. That was the key cornerstone of their team. That meant that they wanted to have a head coach, or they should have had a head coach with a really good background in youth development. And that's what Varas has. Two stints at really well respected academies, including FC Dallas, which is probably the second best academy in MLS behind Red Bull. Don't quote me on that or fact check me.
Too
Um,
late. Quoted.
and
Get him.
followed by a really proven track record to get historically underperforming group in the U20s to not only win CONCACAF but go on a respectable run in the U20 World Cup, right? Were there better hires out there for somebody like that? Maybe, right? I think Bradley Carnell is a name that came to my mind where you look at a guy who spent a ton of time with Red Bull, who had that proven desire to play the kids and has head coaching experience in this league and successful head coaching, taking St. Louis up to the number one spot in the West last year. I don't think Varas is a bad option. I don't think that there were good or there are a lot of different ways you could have gone with that, but he has experience developing players at the national level as well, which is not an easy thing to do, right? So I think it's a really distinguished idea. Like I want to build players up. I want a coach who's going to play them and be able to implement them successfully. And that's what I think they're going with here.
I gotta say, you definitely convinced me more than I was
That's
originally
usually what
on
I
the
do.
point. Like I think you're definitely right in like the youth academy focus for them. And I think in that regard he is good. My only concern is again like results at the end of the day. Because like it's okay, you're developing players, you're building them up, whatever, but like fans are still gonna want to see you win. They don't necessarily they're not there just so that you can like go play some 16-year-old out of your academy so you could sell him for $10 million. Like, sure, the super like hardcore fans are probably gonna like that, but your more casual ones that are just there to like watch the team and want to see them win may not necessarily be on that same page. And I think while there's some similarities, I do think it is a different ball game when you're coaching at the top level versus coaching at the youth level. So I still think there is big risk in the signing, but I think your perspective helped me understand a little bit more with where they're going with it, which I think it makes sense for their objective.
The audio just kind of broke out. Can you just repeat like that first thing you said? You're definitely, and then there was a word after that. I couldn't. I love when you
Won't
tell
do
me I'm
that. Won't do that. We'll just cut that all out. Actually, that's a good point. I'm glad you reminded me.
Oh man,
Editor's
I
note, cut
do.
that out.
I do love when I am right because it is the premise of the pod, right? When I'm right, I'm right. It's just the way it is. But yeah, listen, they're gonna go for that like FC Dallas, Red Bull, Philly, where youth drive to success. And as you mentioned, if their desire is to win things, maybe they're going to transition out of that relatively quickly. I think the last thing that was won was the COVID shield, and then Red Bull has a shield, and FC Dallas did a double in 2016. That's pretty much it. So, not a ton of proof of concept there, but when we talk about building that team for success, what sort of signings do they need? I think you're going to see players, and they've already brought in a really diverse cast. Like, we've seen teams go with all South Americans. We've seen teams go with all Europeans. We've seen them go old, young, kind of like a very set design. They've got a really diverse cast already. Chucky Lozano, Marcus Ingvarsson, gosh, Patty McNair, and Alex Mighton. So like really diverse cast of characters, but usually based in Europe already. But I wonder if they will be pushing to sign more like U22s. I can imagine they're going to take the U22 roster designation, do four of those and two DPs. But I think it would make sense for them to dive into the sort of like Atlanta model and go young, promising, big swings, and even if you miss, you're still going to recoup some of that money. I think that's the way I would see them build this for Mikey Varas because of his experience. I would assume that they're going to heavily rely on those sorts of players, and I would almost think that they've got their older talents already signed on. I think they'll fill out those middle to lower roster spots with older MLS experience, like most teams do through the expansion draft. But I think their big heavy hitters are going to be the youth players. I mean, you've already seen them bring in Alex Mighton, 22-year-olds from Nottingham Forest, and I think that's kind of the path they'll continue on. South, either European based or Mexican American, I think is probably another place they'd go with that. So.
They've been heavy on the European signings. I know Chuky's obviously Mexican nationality, but also coming over from Europe. So that seems to be their focus. They're also like almost exclusively signing people from Nordjylland right now. They have three people coming from Nordjylland.
Well, they
Or
they
no,
have
sorry.
they
There's
also loaned out a couple players there to
yeah, I was actually
Nordstrom.
gonna say they're signing two from there, and then they've loaned Alex Mighton to Nordjylland. So there must be some connection going on there. Oh, well, because that's the right to dream. Right. I was reading about that.
Yep.
All right, so that's that connection there. But yeah, I would agree with you. I think you're definitely going to need some MLS experience in there because right now you have zero MLS experience on this roster. So you're going to need some people who know what it's like playing in the league and like how to deal with the travel and all of that. So I agree. I think that'll come through expansion draft, free agents, trades, all that stuff. I think they're going to still be ambitious. I mean, I think they've proven that with bringing in Chucky Lozano. I think that was I mean, we talked about that already, but I think that was a amazing signing for them, especially considering like where they are geographically, like where he is in his career right now, what he could bring to the table. I think they'll probably continue to do that. I think they're going to leave a lot of the young type of players for their academy. I want to say my guess is they'll focus on kind of the Dallas framework of building guys through the academy and then signing people for the DP roles ambitiously through people from Europe is my guess. Maybe I don't think they're going to have a preference on nationality. Maybe they lean more towards like Mexican Americans that are over in Europe and maybe need to change the scenery, kind of like Chucky Lozano, and bring them over. Like maybe later on in a few years, I could see this as a landing spot for like Santiago Jimenez, but obviously not right now. But that's my guess. I think they stay internal for the youth guys, and I think they stay ambitious in bringing people over from Europe.
Isn't that the guy who like dreams of being half as good as Josh Sargent?
Don't we all dream as being half as good as Josh Sargent?
Amen, brother. Amen. Um, no, so that's I think that's a real good point. We're gonna do a whole breakdown on San Diego before they get into the league, so stick around for that. We didn't do that last year. We didn't have an expansion team, so um, this will be the breakdown for that. But we should move on to the biggest and the best.